Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. We're here today to review VA's progress in the Financial Management Business Transformation Program, or the FMBT. FMBT is the VA's third attempt to modernize its hodgepodge of aging, inadequate financial and accounting systems. These systems are a serious problem. Every year, the VA barely manages to pass its financial statement audit with a clean opinion, despite carrying the same material weaknesses and deficiencies for a decade. At the same time, the department's purchase card spending continues to be much similar to the Wild West. It's been nearly 10 years since the former VA senior procurement executive blew the whistle on billions of dollars of unauthorized commitments, and nothing has fundamentally changed. With so many purchase cards in so many different facilities and no central tracking, the department is practically helpless to enforce its policies, much less root out waste and fraud. And basic financial management functions stretch the capabilities of the systems, like maintaining records when the VA transferred the CARES and ARP funds. When the committee asked basic questions about how the funding was handled during last month's hearing, the VA witnesses struggled to answer. Additionally, one witness showed contempt to members for even trying to perform our basic oversight duties. This situation is untenable, and I appreciate that our witnesses today are attempting to solve it. Simply put, the FMBT program has to succeed. After a false start in 2016 and 2017, VA relaunched the effort in 2018. Since then, the Integrated Financial and Acquisition Management Systems, or IFAMS, has been implemented in the National Cemetery Administration, a few offices within the Veterans Benefits Administration, the Office of Information and Technology, the Office of the Inspector General, and part of the Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction. From the information we have, the system seems to be relatively successful in those offices, but there's still reason to be concerned. These organizations only add up to a few thousand users and a small fraction of the VA's budget. Implementing the IFAMS in the major organizations like the Veterans Health Administration and the big spenders within the Veterans Benefits Administration keeps getting pushed out, and now is not scheduled for a rollout until 2024 and beyond. Meanwhile, the program's implementation costs continue to rise. I'm not suggesting that we have another EHRM here on our hands. Let me be clear. I believe most of the premises of the FMBT are sound. But this effort does seem to be suffering from some of the familiar problems, like poor coordination between the various organizations within the VA, struggles to fit VA's operational practices with commercial software, and extremely long schedules. It's been 3.5 years since the subcommittee last examined the FMBT program. I think veterans and taxpayers are overdue for an update. I appreciate our witnesses joining us today to help us better understand the challenges that you face. I look forward to working to overcome the difficulties and deliver this system successfully. With that, I would yield opening statement time to Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to say that I'm happy that we're having this hearing on an IT modernization program that is so important to the future of VA. As the Inspector General has reported, the use of the aging financial management system has led to manual workarounds, which impedes VA's and Congress's ability to conduct oversight and spending. VA is the second largest federal agency, and it relies on IT infrastructure that is decades old. While we are all aware of the failures in healthcare record and supply chain modernization, this program has largely gone unnoticed. This is a good thing. When an IT program goes well, we usually don't hear about them. Unfortunately, this program is now experiencing delays. Given the importance of this program, this committee needs to understand the underlying issues. This program is foundational to creating not only financial efficiency for the department, but for accountability and oversight of Congress. I hope to hear from our witnesses from VA and the CGI Federal today an honest account of how we can ensure the successful and timely development of IFAMS. I won't belabor a point I've made at every hearing we've had in the subcommittee this Congress. VA obviously does not have the management infrastructure in place to coordinate and ensure the success of these large IT modernization efforts. There are bills that have co-sponsors that would at the very least start moving them in the right direction, and I hope that we can start acting on these soon here in the House. IT modernization is mandatory, not optional. It is in everyone's interest to finally do this in a way that does not upset veterans and employees and waste billions of dollars. Commitment to management and standardization of processes across the department is essential to our future success. Thank you again, Chairman. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses this morning.
Thank you, Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick. I will now introduce the witnesses on our first panel. First, the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have Ms. Teresa Riffle, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Financial Management Business Transformation. We also have Mr. Charles Tapp, the Chief Financial Officer for the Veterans Benefits Administration, and Mr. Daniel McCune, Deputy Chief Information Officer for Software Product Management at the Office of Information and Technology. Next, we have Mr. Sidney Getz, Senior Vice President for CGI Federal. And finally, we have Mr. Nick Dahl, Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Audits and Evaluations at the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Veterans Affairs. If you all would please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. And let the record reflect that all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Ms. Riffle, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick, and all members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of the Department of Veterans Affairs Financial Management Business Transformation Program and its implementation of the Integrated Financial and Acquisition Management System. I am accompanied by Daniel McCune, Deputy Chief Information Officer for Software Product Management, and Charles Tapp, Chief Financial Officer of the Veterans Benefits Administration. VA cannot continue to rely on its legacy financial management system due to the enormous risk it presents to VA operations. It is becoming increasingly difficult to support from a technical and functional ability standpoint, cannot correct new audit findings, and is not compliant with today's internal control standards. I am proud to report that IFAMS is no longer proof of concept. It is successfully replacing VA's antiquated 1980s era financial management system. It has been successfully up and running at VA for almost 3 years. VA completed 6 successful deployments of IFAMS encompassing 20 offices and 4,700 users across the enterprise. That includes the entirety of the National Cemetery Administration, a portion of Veterans Benefits Administration, and several major staff offices, including the Office of Information and Technology, Office of Inspector General. IFAMS users have collectively processed over 3.5 million transactions, representing almost $10 billion in Treasury disbursements. IFAMS is stable, achieving over 99.9% uptime. On June 12, 2023, VA went live with its largest deployment to date, increasing the current user base by 60%. It was also the first time VA went live simultaneously with both the finance and acquisition components of IFAMS, which demonstrates IFAMS is a viable solution capable of becoming the next generation financial and acquisition solution for VA. It's important to understand that IFAMS is not just a new core accounting and acquisition system. It is crucial to transforming VA's business processes and capabilities, both so we can meet our goals and objectives in compliance with financial management legislation and continue to successfully execute our mission to provide veterans with the health care and benefits they have earned and deserve. With so much at stake, both in terms of taxpayer dollars and the department's ability to serve veterans, it is vital that VA accurately track and report how funds are used. Fortunately, IFAMS significantly improves funds tracking capabilities, which among many other benefits will help ensure proper tracking of PACT Act expenditures. Through the use of IFAMS, VA is increasing the transparency, accuracy, and timeliness and reliability of financial information. VA is gaining enhanced planning, analysis, and decision-making capabilities because of improved data integrity, reporting functionality, and business intelligence. VA is demonstrating these achievements through a range of metrics and associated targets based on industry best practices. IFAMs and process changes are part of VA's strategy to resolve long-standing financial material weaknesses and strengthen internal controls. For example, and in contrast to our current system, which cannot capture transaction approvals, IFAMs routes documents to approving officials and allows supporting documentation to be attached directly to the transaction. Additionally, IFAMs requires additional levels of approval for high-dollar transactions. IFAMs also eliminates the need for an external tool to adjust entries for financial reporting. Perhaps most importantly, IFAMs complies with reporting requirements from the Office of Management and Budget, the Department of the Treasury, to capture various account attributes and conform to the U.S. Standard General Ledger. VA's current system is unable to meet those requirements, which has led to extensive and inefficient manual workarounds, and IFAMs will remediate all of these. Our success has been and continues to be built on partnerships, mutual respect, and two-way collaboration with our users. Accordingly, IFAMs established a dedicated Chief Experience Officer to coordinate user interactions and change management activities. FMBT's change management practices place a heavy emphasis on continuous improvement. Using customer feedback and our own observations, audit findings, and industry best practices, we establish lessons learned during each wave and incorporate those lessons into subsequent wave deployments. FMBT continues to stay on budget despite changes. Our successes would not be possible without the ongoing support of Congress, and we appreciate the opportunity today to discuss this important initiative. We will continue to work judiciously with veterans foremost in mind to modernize VA's financial and acquisition management system and provide you with updates as we make further progress. Although we are encouraged by our success to date, we are keenly focused on the difficult work that lies ahead and are steadfast in our commitment to see this initiative through its successful conclusion. Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherfilis McCormick, and subcommittee members, this concludes my opening statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Riffle. The written statement of Ms. Riffle will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Getz, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherfilis McCormick, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. My name is Sid Getz, and I am a Senior Vice President at CGI Federal. For the last 5 years, I have served as the project manager on CGI Federal's contract with the VA for the Financial Management Business Transformation Program known as FMBT. At the subcommittee's invitation, I'm here today to provide the requested status update and underscore CGI Federal's ongoing commitment to the success of the VA's FMBT program. As you know, in 2016, the VA established the FMBT program to modernize its 30-year-old legacy core financial management system, FMS, in compliance with applicable regulatory requirements. To accomplish this complex modernization effort, the VA selected CGI Federal to deploy its Momentum Enterprise Resource Planning solution. Momentum, known at the VA as the Integrated Financial and Acquisitions Management System, or IFAMS, is an OMB-approved financial management system that is operational at many federal government agencies. To mitigate program risk, the FMBT program is migrating users from the VA's legacy financial and acquisition systems to IFAMS using an incremental deployment approach. Each deployment or wave delivers specifically configured IFAMS capabilities to a defined set of the VA's organization using an agile-based implementation methodology. To date, the FMBT program has completed 6 waves, deploying IFAMS to 4,700 users at 20 different VA offices. While there are still milestones and challenges ahead, to be sure, IFAMS is already delivering benefits to the VA's finance and acquisitions user communities. These benefits include improved strategic and daily decision-making, process automation, compliance with federal accounting regulations, maintaining clean audits, and accommodating new regulatory requirements. A prime example of how IFAMS is helping the VA user community is the power of its real-time transaction processing and on-demand reporting. Today, IFAMS users can easily generate standard financial and acquisition reports and drill down into current, accurate data on demand. This is because when transactions are entered in IFAMs, they are first verified to meet VA standards and then automatically update budgets in the general ledger in real time. IFAMs users also have the capability to refresh reports hourly rather than daily, and can run most reports at the enterprise level, administration level, or lower levels of the VA organization. Before IFAMs, some similar reports took days to produce through a manual, resource-intensive, spreadsheet-based process. As with other complex programs, success often depends on the stakeholders' focus on key performance factors. The same holds true here, where the teams focus on collaboration and transparency, enterprise-wide standardization, continuous improvement, diligent change management, and execution of its risk-based incremental delivery approach has kept the program moving forward. To illustrate this point, let me share how the team has maximized the value of formal user acceptance testing, also known as UAT. In the first few waves, users performed hands-on UAT towards the end of each wave. This is a common and standard approach. Lessons learned taught us that we'd improve user adoption by having users perform iterative, hands-on testing of IFAM's functionality and business processes much earlier in each wave. So we refined the program implementation methodology and applied this approach to the 3 most recent waves. By helping users gain an earlier appreciation of IFAMs, the team gained useful feedback for change management and training. It also has allowed us to identify and resolve issues earlier, saving both time and resources. I end this testimony where I began, by reiterating CGI Federal's unwavering commitment to collaborating with the FMBT program to deliver IFAMs to the entire VA user base for the benefit of our veterans. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Getz. The written statement of Mr. Getz will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Dahl, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherfilis McCormick, and subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to discuss our oversight of VA's financial management challenges. Since 2015, the audit of VA's financial statements has reported a material weakness due to problematic financial management systems. Full implementation of IFAMs could help resolve this persistent material weakness and increase the transparency, accuracy, timeliness, and reliability of financial information across VA. Accordingly, we began oversight of the implementation shortly after it went live at NCA in November 2020. Prior modernization efforts failed in part because of poor planning and flawed execution, combined with challenges transitioning from legacy systems. Decentralized oversight, unrealistic timelines, inadequate engagement of stakeholders and end users, and minimal testing have plagued IT projects. The resulting delays, changes in direction in vendors, and user resistance all carry steep costs. In the most recent audit of VA's financial statements, the auditor found 3 material weaknesses and 2 significant deficiencies. The material weakness, most pertinent to this testimony, focuses on the limited functionality of the current system to meet VA's financial management and reporting needs. Over time, VA's complex and antiquated financial system has deteriorated and no longer meets increasingly stringent requirements mandated by the Treasury Department and OMB. Deficiencies in VA's financial management system are illustrated in findings we made related to VA's use of COVID-19 funding, which showed VA lacked assurance that those funds were spent as intended. Generally, our 3 reports found VA is complying with Transparency and Trust Act reporting requirements. However, we identified concerns with the completeness and accuracy of VA's reporting. A major cause for this is VHA's reliance on several systems for payroll and purchase card transactions, requiring manual entries by staff, which increases the risk of reporting errors. The practice of manual expenditure transfers led to a lack of transparency and accountability over VHA purchases seen in our audit on VA's use of CARES Act funds. We found VHA staff not properly documenting the transfers and inadequate guidance from VHA's Office of Finance. This happened because of financial reporting systems limitations and a lack of oversight that resulted in VHA medical facility staff determining on their own what constituted appropriate documentation. Additionally, staff did not follow basic controls like documenting purchasing authority, splitting duties between requesting and purchasing items, and verifying ordered goods were received. As a result, we reported an estimated $187 million in question costs. We felt early oversight of the IFAMS project was critical to help VA achieve program goals, and we initially issued 2 memoranda. One detailed that FMBTS had not ensured NCA had the comprehensive reports needed to monitor budget and operations for months after the initial IFAMS go-live date, requiring staff to engage in workarounds. The second identified other potential risks related to financial reporting for FMBTS to consider addressing. In March 2023, our audit found FMBTS needed to do more work to fully address some barriers related to the program's goal of streamlining processes and improving information reliability with a focus on contracts converted into IFAMS from the legacy contract system. Our findings related to system functionality and procedures, and we made 5 recommendations to implement controls and processes to reduce risk and enhance communication on requirements, develop methodologies to prioritize user feedback, and include legacy systems, converted contracts, and system testing. We will soon begin the follow-up process on these recommendations. In summary, the transition to IFAMS could mitigate major issues in producing VA's financial statements and improving VA operations. These initial findings are early opportunities for improvement that may yield results for VA as they continue implementing this complicated system. We urge VA to dedicate the resources to resolve issues and remain ready to identify the challenges that may arise in the months and years ahead. That concludes my statement, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl, and the written statement of Mr. Dahl will be entered into the hearing record. We now proceed to the questioning, and I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Riffle, during last month's hearing on VA CARES Act spending, I asked the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Rychalski, about a $714,235 expenditure transfer where the medical center could not produce any documents establishing an audit trail because the person who processed it had retired. VA has still not explained how much money was actually paid out, for what purpose, and who approved it. How would the IFAM system prevent or resolve this type of a situation?
Thank you for that question. IFAMS will resolve that. So we have the ability now for those customers that are in IFAMS to actually trace expenditures down to that level. So we're able to load the budget and actually reflect expenditures against it. I want to give one caveat around payroll, and I think in the response that VA recently provided, we stated this as well, is that we do have to work with our interface partners, predominantly on the payroll side, to make sure that they're sending us the information to be able to trace it and record it appropriately against the right account. So the answer is yes, sir. IFAMS will address this 100%.
As long as the proper information is entered in.
That's correct, sir.
Junk in, junk out. Good information in, good information out.
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Riffle, VA struggles to manage its purchase card spending because employees at thousands of individual facilities make purchases, and the data on those purchases is fragmented. Can you explain why this is the case and how the IFAM system would track that data?
Yeah, so in IFAMS, the purchase card ability to purchase with a purchase card is substantially different than what it is in legacy system today. And so we will see advancements in terms of traceability on what individuals are purchasing. And I would also defer to OALC, as I know I'm on a couple of subcommittees with them, and they're making concerted efforts on reducing the use of the purchase card and driving users to contracts where contracts are appropriate. But again, I would defer to them on more elaboration on that effort that's underway.
Thank you very much. In last month's hearing, Mr. Rychalska touted the reduction in VA's improper payment rate. But you still had $3.5 billion in improper payments last year. Your annual purchase card spending is about $5 billion. How much of that $3.5 billion represents purchase card spending, And would the IFAM system ever allow you to get that number down to or at least near zero?
Yeah, so I'll have to take that particular question for the record in terms of the amounts there.
Okay. Mr. Dahl, your report on VA CARES Act spending found that every single one of the 10,064 supply purchases and service contracts had some sort of procedural noncompliance. This led to your office questioning over $187 million of transactions, most of which were made using purchase cards. Which of the VA's current systems process the purchase card transactions? What is wrong with them? And why is this such a big liability for financial management?
I think the issue with the purchase card comes down to oversight. Purchase card, as you've mentioned, many purchase card holders in VA that use their cards. Without appropriate oversight from the purchase card accountable officials, there's nothing that's going to stop people currently from using the purchase cards. So every card holder has an accountable official that should be reconciling their spending on a monthly basis to make sure that the purchases are appropriate and supported. And we're just not.
So is it that in your opinion, are the supervisors not given good guidance on what is acceptable and what isn't and the processes, or are they not conveying that information down to their subordinates?
I would say it's likely a mix of both of those situations.
Okay. And Mr. McCune and Ms. Riffle, I understand the IFAM system went live in the Office of Information Technology last week, and all the purchase card transactions are now being run through the system. How is it that OIT's process different now, and what improvements has it made?
So thank you for that question. And actually, I just talked with the OIT a few minutes ago before this hearing, just to check in, make sure how things were going very well. But again, the purchase card module within IFAM is substantially different than what they currently do with IFCAP today. So we are consistently working with users to make sure that they understand those differences. I would tell you also that the reconciliation process substantially different in IFAMs than what it is in legacy. And so, so far, and again, we're only 1 week in with that user community, but we have no issues that have been expressed or concerns from that group at this time.
Very good. Thank you very much. I will now yield 5 minutes to Representative Sherfless McCormick for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the Office of Inspector General highlighted in their report last month, the need for modernization for VA's financial system is imperative. VA is the second largest agency in the federal government and has to rely on a 30-year-old system to manage billions of dollars it receives from the Congress every year. Mr. Dahl, the limited functionality of the financial management system continues to be a material weakness in VA's financial system audits. Can you explain the ramifications of not having a modern financial management system, not only to your work, but to the success of managing the funds of VA?
Well, without a modern system, VA is very likely to continue to have a material weakness on the annual financial statement audit. They're going to continue to have to rely on manual processes and interventions to accomplish transactions, certain transactions. They're going to be lacking the transparency and accountability over the use of funds. I would say those would be the key concerns.
Now, with the manual overrides, how do you catch any mistakes?
Well, that would come down to, is there a supervisor checking on that? And, frankly, I'm not sure that that's always happening. Of course, if you're doing that, there's always a risk of error, as Mr. Rosendale said, garbage in, garbage out, but it's probably more likely to happen when someone's having to manually process a transaction.
And so when we look at waste, do you feel like we have an adequate understanding of how much waste is going on without an automated system that's fully functioning?
It would be hard for me to characterize that. This system FMS was conceived in the 1980s. I mean, it's so far back in the past. Certainly people weren't envisioning the current needs, the current environment. So I think it would be a huge step forward to bring a modern system online.
Thank you. Mr. Tapp, I'm sure you've heard about the manual workarounds that we've required as a result of not being able to use FMS for the transfer of supplemental funds. Can you provide to the committee some insight into the restrictions that antiquated technology puts on you as the CFO of the Veterans Benefit Administration?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. So antiquated systems basically limit our ability to have strategic decision-making capability for us to be able to look across the enterprise and be able to look at the resources that we've been provided to be able to make decisions on changes in priorities and also make changes day to day. Those certainly limit our ability. It also limits our ability to implement new legislation and to provide the proper insights in terms of what's been spent and how quickly it's been spent without using Excel spreadsheets or other things that are offline. And you certainly want to use your system of record to be able to capture that information. Since we've implemented IFAMs, we can certainly say for the general operating expense, we've been able to provide a more granular response when it comes down to reporting on expenses that we have in VBA. So the system is working as intended for the general operating expense, but certainly using the legacy system, it had some limitations that we're glad that IFAMs will help resolve.
Now, in my past experience, I was a CEO of a healthcare company, and it was extremely difficult I couldn't imagine doing a manual override to forecast expenses and also forecast what we're saving. How are you able to realistically forecast the next year of savings and actually what you're actually losing, such as waste?
That has been certainly been a challenge with FMS because of how expenses are grouped together by budget object class or by BOC, because they're lumped together. Certainly IFAMs, again, allows us to be more dynamic in terms of seeing at a more granular level what we've spent and allow us to certainly do more analysis as we look forward using, again, the granular details that we're able to pick in IFAMs. So again, the transparency and the level of granularity is certainly enhanced with IFAMs.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative, and I yield 5 minutes to Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dahl has used basically said people are involved in everything. I think that's fair summary. Ms. Riffle, are you getting pushback from the field on fielding this new system?
So thanks for that question. Certainly we're carrying a risk around change management from a program perspective overall. What I would tell you, though, is that as we get more and more into VA, what we're starting to see is people really coming around and being encouraged by what they see. And so I think that I wouldn't say we're over the hurdle by any means because change is hard. But I will tell you that we're not seeing as much pushback as we were if you were to ask me this question 2 years ago.
Okay. Now, I understand you've got about 4,700 users out of a total workforce of 400,000, thereabouts. So you've spent $1 billion on 1/2 of the users out of a budget of what, 7 billion odd? So are you going to make the 7 billion? You've now have 1/2 that you've rolled the system out to.
Yeah, so actually, we're expected to have 124,910 users on the system at full deployment. We've currently got, as we said, about 4,700 on the system. What I will acknowledge is that obviously VHA is the largest organization that we have yet to implement. I would also tell you that that's by design. We want to make sure that we're addressing any improvements that we need to make with our deployment strategy before we tackle VHA, and also the complex programs that VBA has remaining. Those obviously would impact veterans in some way if we don't do them correctly. And so we've purposely established the schedule in the manner that we have so that we can ensure that we're learning from what we've already done. And by the time we get to VHA, we'll leverage all of those improvement activities when we implement.
So is there any chance that your delayed systems, VBA loan guarantee, VBA insurance, VBA acquisition, can be moved faster as you learn lessons, or are you committed to your as late as 29?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. What I would tell you is right now we just completed a 3-day lock-in with VBA on loan guarantee. We've addressed the 6 items that were remaining to ensure that we are in agreement with VBA on exactly how we're going to implement LGY. We're in the process of re-baselining that schedule right now. As soon as we finalize that, we'll actually address whether there's opportunity to accelerate and move other VBA programs to the left after we finalize that re-baseline.
Okay, very good. And in your written testimony, you talked about the 2 GAO reports and the 8 recommendations. So I pulled the most recent GAO recaps of this program. You said that there was 1 remaining open. The GAO currently references 7 are open and 1 is closed. As recently as February of 2023, they have at least 3 open with that date. Can you reconcile for me your testimony with the GAO updates?
Yeah, I believe that those, I'll get back to you, I'll take that for the record, but we will reconcile that. It may be a timing issue on some of those, but we'll make sure we've got that reconciled for you, sir.
Okay, but again, at least 3 of them, I can find a date of February 2023, they were still open according to the GAO. And I know that GAO makes recommendations, but I still would like to see a response on your implementation of the GAO recommendations. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Self. Ms. Riffle, you're getting near the midpoint of the FMBT program, and many of the important milestones are being delayed while the cost estimate continues to rise. These are the concerns that I have when I start looking back at some of the other software programs that we've invested in. I understand you did not initially include the operations and maintenance costs for the life of the systems through 2047, but the implementation costs have also been increasing from $2.3 billion up to $4.2 billion. And completion has slipped from 2028 to 2030 or later. Similar to Representative Self's question, why is the implementation cost increasing, and can you guarantee me it will not go above that $4.2 billion mark?
So thanks for that question. So currently the projected life cycle cost estimate is at 7.46, going out to 2047, which is accounting for the useful life as you indicated. What we will tell you is that based on the methodology that we're using to deploy, there will be instances from time to time where we find, for example, a new interface that wasn't originally identified. As you can imagine, in VA, we're doing constant modernization across the enterprise. So we are going to have discovery from time to time. What I would tell you is that the way that we're structured in an agile fashion, it's allowed us to continue to proceed, to actually move other waves forward or begin activity on another wave while we're pending getting more intel on a modernization interface or something like that. So although you are seeing some increases, what you're also seeing is our ability to flex with that and to ebb and flow as those modernization efforts continue. And I can tell you in VA, the size that it is, we will continue to have modernization that's happening simultaneously. And our program, the way we're structured, you have to be structured to be able to absorb that and to be able to flex with it.
Look, I understand. I really do. And I understand as you're going through this process, you used to find, like you say, some enterprises and some functions that nobody had anticipated. It's sort of like doing a renovation on an old home, okay? And you pull the wall out and you start finding additional things. And that's why all these jobs are based on typically time and materials, okay, when you come to old construction. However, we're using taxpayers' funds. So all I'm trying to do is establish some kind of a cap. Can you assure me that we're not going to go over that $4.2 billion range?
You know, that's our life cycle cost estimate at this point in time, sir.
Okay, so that would be an estimate. You can't guarantee that that's where we're going to finish up.
Not guarantee that, no.
Mr. Getz, the VA has spent over $1 billion on this project so far. How much of that has your company received?
Approximately $440 million.
Excuse me?
$440 million since the inception of the contract in August 2018.
Mr. Getz, how much of the $7.5 billion life cycle cost, including implementing the system as well as maintaining it, does your company expect to get paid?
Sir, I've not even thought about that. At the moment, we're focused on just the implementation piece.
So you haven't run a life cycle cost estimate and to determine how much you should estimate?
We have not, no.
So how is it that the VA then has their estimate, if you weren't included in that?
So I think I would certainly defer to Ms. Riffle on this, but what we look at is what is the cost to implementation plus the operations and maintenance costs for whatever contract we have. At some point, the life cycle turns over to operations and maintenance, and then that's a different way of looking at what those future.
Again, so I've got the
Yeah.
life cycle estimate, but they had to get those numbers from somewhere, and that's why I'm trying to figure out how much of it would be from you. They had to get some kind of estimate from you.
I would defer to Ms. Riffle if I could on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we have data that we've used, obviously, from the implementations to date. So when you do a life cycle cost estimate, you're forecasting for the rest of that. Obviously, understanding what your implementation has been to date based on size, complexity of the wave. So that was a lot of the basis that was used in going into it. And then certainly, we've got program costs related to the organization supporting the wave.
Sure, you're
across the
forecasting. I
VA.
understand estimate and forecast best information. So how much have you plugged in for Mr. Getz' company then?
So, right, and what's in front of you, I believe there, sir, is the overall categories of costs that we have. So from a technology and program management perspective, it's inclusive of a couple of the other contractors that are supporting some activity in that area. So I would have to take for the record specifically what's out of that category CGI.
Okay, thank you very much. I will yield another 5 minutes to Representative Sheriff McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Reffel, with the task of executing a program of this size is an incredible challenge in itself. The dependency of this program to integrate with IT modernization efforts that are currently not in existence seems to me to be a recipe for failure. We know that this program has gone from needing to integrate with EHRM to now being required to integrate with a modern supply chain system that has suffered from years of delays. What are you, as the leader of FMBT, able to do to mitigate the risk of your program?
Yeah, thank you for that. So a couple things that we've done recently is that we have worked significantly with VHA and with supply chain, and in order for FMBT to proceed with VHA, understanding where the other initiatives are right now, we're proceeding with integrating with legacy supply chain. And so as we move into VHA, which obviously we've been working with VHA for the past 2 years, but we're at the point now where we need to start really in earnest working on the implementation. We'll implement with legacy. With EHRM, we have been coordinating with that office since inception. They have all of our requirements, detailed requirements. We'll continue to do that collaboration across the board. And then, as they continue to move out, when they do, we'll be prepared for that integration.
How confident that these mitigations that you just mentioned are going to be successful?
For VHA, they will, because it allows me to integrate with what's available right now as I'm going to implement at a site, and also understanding that when the enterprise supply chain solution becomes available, we'll pivot and we'll actually integrate with that future solution. We know we need to do it, but in the interim, we're going to integrate with what's available right now so we can proceed.
And do you feel that FMBT should be allowed to deploy across VA without having to depend on successful implementation of programs like EHRM and the supply chain?
Yeah, so I think what I just laid out in terms of how we're going to actually do the future state for VHA and then the end state for VHA once supply chain is known is a solid plan to allow us to proceed with FMBT.
Thank you. Mr. McCune, OIT has the impossible task of coordinating a number of large IT modernization programs, as once included in EHRM, supply chain, and HR modernization. How does OIT manage the development and delivery of these desperate programs?
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. And thank you for appreciating the complexity of managing 3 modernization efforts at the same time. I think a solid project management process allows us to do this effectively. I look at number 1, having clear business objectives. Number 2, looking at a solid risk and issue management process. I look at tight coordination with the customer around change management. So by following these established best practices in project management, we're allowed to keep these projects moving at the same time.
And who is ultimately responsible for the timing and coordination of these programs?
Yeah, that's a joint responsibility. So in the case of FMBT, the business office is Office of Management, and accountability is the CFO. In OI&T, we focus on the technology and the security of the system, so we use FedRAMP, ATO, and FITARA process, and that falls under the CIO.
And does OIT have enough authority within VA to make significant changes to schedules of these programs to mitigate issues as they rise?
Yes, ma'am, we do, given the tight coordination with our customer. And I think we're seeing that now as we build the wave schedule for FMBT and now even adjustments with LGY. OIT is at the table helping build that schedule.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Self, recognize you for additional 5 minutes.
I think I'll yield for the time being, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Getz, how are payments structured in your contract?
A couple of different ways. There are parts of the contract that are firm fixed price, and there are parts of the contract that are time and materials.
Are you being paid for each implementation wave or another method?
Another method. We're being paid. The wave implementation component of the contract is time and materials because of the lot of uncertainty around that. So what we do is for each the beginning of each fiscal year, prior to the beginning of each fiscal year, we would work with the program to determine what the work is to be done in the next fiscal year, agree to that, provide an estimate, and then we're paid on a time and materials basis for that piece.
Okay, so some of the most important waves have been delayed by multiple years. How's that affected your payments, if at all?
Since they're all time and materials, again, those payments are determined by the work done in whatever the next fiscal year is.
Okay, so we've got the estimates of what the rollout of this project is supposed to be, and yet, as we've been discussing, the smallest portion of them has been implemented. And we have the back end, okay, a lot more work that has much left to be done. How much is each implementation wave worth, and roughly what percentage is that of the contract's annual value?
Sorry.
So
Mr. Chairman, can you
again,
repeat the question?
if it's not being based on the wave, okay, it's been based on estimates of time and material, and we have the total estimate of the cost of this project, and we know that this is getting to the crux of what is the eventual cost going to be. We see that not that many people are being served right now, okay? Yeah. Not that many services are being accounted for right now. The back end is where the work is going to be piled up, and yet a lot of this contract value has been burned up already. So what I'm trying to get at is how are we going to reconcile that?
Well, again, when I think Ms. Riffle has referred to the fact that there's some planning going on with VHA and VBA to determine what the rest of the waves would look like and what order and the degree to which they would be parallel or combined. And once we have that, we will be able to provide a solid estimate on what the rest of the work looks like.
So I'm just having a really difficult time reconciling this because you're telling me you have estimates, and again, when a layman looks at this and sees that there is a very small percentage of this work that has been done, and the contract value, a lot of that has been utilized already. This is not reconciling. Mr. Dahl, does the structure of this contract sound typical based on what you've seen elsewhere in the VA?
I personally don't have any teams that have been involved in looking at the contract. There is a team within the Office of Audits that is looking at the contract, so I could take that for the record.
I would really appreciate that. And do you believe it is sufficient to drive accountability? Do you believe, when they look at this contract, someone is going to need to report back to us and let us understand if it was structured in such a way as to provide accountability for the work that's being done based upon the projected total cost of that project?
I would not be in a position to answer that, sir.
Okay, Ms. Riffle, you've already spent 5 years and more than $1 billion to implement the IFAMS system in 7 offices. I understand this project has a lot of startup costs and fixed costs, got that. But this is an enormous amount of money to cover with just a few of the offices. Where's the money going besides the implementation of the waves?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand what all it takes to actually implement a wave. So we have a large portion is going to a project management contract to help us make sure planning, the execution of the documentation surrounding project management and how you're going to actually implement. We also have data conversion, which is a huge effort for us. We do a number of mock conversions up front for every wave to make sure the accuracy, et cetera. A development effort in terms of interface development that's needed. So substantial cost, you know, this is an enterprise solution, both acquisition and finance. So the cost is going to be significant to get it done. The other huge piece of the PMO contract is the organizational change management activities. Substantial work there. We've been actually increasing some of the work there based on lessons learned, making sure that we get that user adoption as we need to. So, you know, to me, there's a lot going on to make sure we get it right.
And I agree with that. And this is exactly the concern that I have, okay? So as you go through and do all these conversions and all these startup costs, okay, with the smaller institutions, we're going to have to do those exact same things for the larger ones, are we not?
Absolutely.
So how is it then that you can tell me, that you can sit here in front of this committee and not tell me that this estimate is going to be too low?
Well, part of it is how we're estimating that future for VHA. We're talking about predominantly VHA here. For VBA, we have probably about 300 additional users, and we have a lot of activity due around interfaces for the remainder of VBA's complex programs. For VHA, that's where a lot of the hard work is going to come in. We have been working with VHA for 2.5 years now, so we have a lot of information and understanding about VHA. VHA, and credit to them, has actually been working on data cleanse activities, which is substantial for data conversion for the past couple of years. They continue to do that. VHA's worked on standardizing their accounting classification structure and, where possible, looking at standardizing business processes. So a lot of work has gone into VBA. A lot of discovery is already known about VHA, which has helped contribute to our estimates on what VHA is going to look like.
Again, still don't understand when you say that they're larger institutions, we have to go through the conversions, we have to go through the startup, how that is going to cost less than the much, much smaller organizations that we've already brought on. I'm not reconciling that. So, Representative Sherfless McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As is often the case when discussed issues with IT modernization programs, technology is usually not the root cause of VA's issues. Many joke that when you've been to one VA, you've been to one VA. I personally don't find that funny. This organization has languished progress in IT modernization specifically because there is little to no standardization across the system. Ms. Riffle, has your staff begun efforts with VHA to standardize workflows for using the new financial systems across the country?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, so as I just mentioned, we've actually been working with VHA for the past couple of years. We have standardized their accounting classification structure at a certain level so that they will have visibility into spend at an enterprise level. But there is a few uniquenesses to VHA, though, I would say. So some medical centers have spinal cord and injury activity. Others have, open heart surgery. So where necessary, we will look to be able to record and track cost for those specific organizations that are a little bit different. But otherwise, from an accounting perspective, a lot of it is very similar, and they are looking at it from a standardization perspective there. That doesn't mean that the business processes are universal at each medical center. So change management at VHA is going to be critical to make sure that we meet those users where they are, how they operate at their medical center, what they do, and we'll work with them to make sure that we standardize as best we can their business processes, but we absolutely are standardizing their accounting to be able to track.
Given the uniqueness of the VA's facilities, each individual one, has it been difficult to identify best practices?
Well, we haven't gone out into VHA in earnest yet, but I can tell you that the senior executive that's leading that effort for VHA, and she actually has field experience, which I think is very good, she is looking to actually do that standardization where it makes sense within VHA.
And how long do you perceive that this process of standardization, identifying best practices will take?
Well, our intent is that we will address that in the first couple of pilots so that we can make sure that we take the lessons learned from those pilots and that we're prepared at that point to evaluate, can we accelerate VHA at all? We want to get a couple of pilots under our belt to make sure that we get it correct for VHA.
So if we're looking at full implementation, what's the rough timeline?
Right now on the schedule, it's 2029. We actually have a sit-down schedule session with them coming up in the month of July based on the known direction now with supply chain. So we'll start to lay in that work a little bit more definitively with VHA now.
And what are the risks to success of FMBT if user adoption is not prioritized and the medical and contracting centers?
So obviously, user adoption is front and center for all of us. I would tell you that our upfront collaboration and transparency with the users, all the way from the senior executive down to the person doing the receiving, is critical to being successful and meeting people where they are. And so I feel like our program is structured in a manner that we are geared for success, the way that we've approached the change management within VA. And I've been with VA 37 years. I understand the cultural, really difficult change that VA is going to undergo here. And I think that you have to make sure that people are heard, they feel like they're heard, and you actually not just feel like, but that you are, and that you're listening to them, making adjustments where you need to.
Now, Mr. Tapp, I saw you nodding your head, so I would like you to answer the same question. What are the risks to success of FMBT if user adoption is not prioritized by VBA?
So you hit the nail on the head. The biggest risk is user adoption. In VBA, and I would definitely say across VA, we're in the people business. We're people serving people. And as we start looking at IFAMs, it's so important that we keep our employees and the users of the system at the center. So again, as we implemented and started at the beginning, we use them as a part of our user stories and then use them as a part of the testing. But the most important thing as we look point forward, particularly for the GOE wave, is that training is not a one-time event, it's iterative, and we have to be engaged. And for me, particularly around IFAM and its adoption, implementation, and it continue to be a part of the culture that we have as far as, it's just not a tool, it's a part of our culture. It requires that I'm personally engaged in terms of reaching out to our user community to understand, number one, they have an advocate. Number two is that you have someone who's going to listen. And number three, we have a great partnership, and we'll use that with Ms. Riffle and her team to continue to make the improvements that we need to, so as different generations of users come on board, that they're able to use the system, get the training they need to be successful. But right now, we have at least 3 generations of users, folks who are 5 years or less, people who are mid-tier, and some folks who've been working with VA for 2 decades or longer, and each of them see the system differently, and we have to make sure we meet them all where they are from a training perspective.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Self, recognize you 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been doing some scratching here, and I'm with the chairman. I just can't make the figures work. What is your, what are you using as estimate of inflation? Let's just start there.
Yeah, so sir, I'll have to take that for the record, but we certainly can give you the detail and the methodology behind our life cycle cost estimate.
Because that's going to degrade your figures here.
Yeah.
Is this scalable? Because it looks to me like of the users that you gave us, you've got about less than 4% of your users are currently on the system. And if I'm reading your charts right, you've already used right at 25%, taking out operations and maintenance. So I just don't know how you're going to get there. Let me ask you a specific question, though. There's a huge percentage of your implementation, your development and implementation costs in project management. So break down for me of your development cost and implementation cost, and let's get a little more granular than your chart. How much is, let's just use procurement, training, infrastructure, organizational change. So I'm just trying to get a handle on why there is such a huge percentage in program management.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I can partially answer, sir, is the program management includes implementation cost or within that particular category, as well as organizational change management. In the piece for technology, that's really the hardware and some of the licensing and where appropriate, the interface development work there. So that's where I can tell you the preponderance of the category of things that make up those cost components.
I just, I question your life cycle, the way you've got it laid out. I just don't think you've got enough to get it done, but we'll see if it's, because you're going to have to get a whole lot more efficient as you move forward, whole lot more efficient.
Yeah, we would expect to get efficient. The other thing I would just offer, which is part of the GAO audit, sir, is the we have a independent group doing a life cycle cost, independent life cycle cost right now for the program, and that will certainly inform us if we're off base with what we've done ourselves on this cost estimate, and that is expected in the December timeframe, sir.
Well, I will tell you, in the GAO summaries of these 8 that we mentioned, 8 recommendations that we mentioned, the word metrics is scattered throughout many of them. So I think that goes back to what I'm asking here. What are the metrics of moving forward that you're going to have to meet in order to meet your goals? So I look forward to that explanation. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative. Ms. Ripple, separate from your FMBT project, VA has attempted 2 different supply chain modernization efforts over the past 4 years. I understand that you need to integrate the IFAM system with an inventory management system, and you still don't know what the inventory management system is going to be. First of all, how long have you been waiting for this decision, and what problems has the uncertainty caused?
Thanks for that question. So as I indicated, we've been continuously working with VHA, so even absent understanding what the future supply chain solution was, there was still valid work that we could do with VHA to move that particular implementation forward, which we've continued to do. In terms of the inventory package, because we're going to be implementing with legacy, at least right now in the beginning until enterprise supply chain is known, we will integrate with the generic inventory package, which is part of the VISTA application, in order for the facilities to maintain their inventory levels. We don't want to do any disruption to what happens today.
Do you anticipate, because of working with these other programs and the investment of time and energy and resources that you're using, that you're going to, once another decision is made, that you're going to have to go through all of the conversion work and everything again to have this duplication of efforts when a final decision is made?
So in terms of conversion, for us, it would be no. Certainly, supply chain will have to evaluate how they're going to do conversion activities. We would want to be in alignment where there's interdependencies on that data, and we would certainly work towards that with them once they understand exactly where they're going. But we have accounted for understanding that once they get an enterprise solution and the integration is known, that we will move to that at that point. We understand that, and we're going to continue and work that direction.
Okay, and right on that same line, what capabilities does the interim state lack that are supposed to be in the final state, and what do you need in order to proceed to that final state?
Yeah, so I can respond as it relates to the IFAM solution. So what we're doing is implementing the inherent momentum COTS functionality across the enterprise. There's two major components that are specifically supply chain driven that obviously IFAMS doesn't do. One is the catalog ordering capability, where they need to go in and determine what they're ordering out of the catalog. The other is the inventory piece. The other components that IFCAP performs today, IFAMS will do. And again, we'll work directly with, and we have commitment from supply chain on our legacy, integrating with legacy. It's a slightly different group, but we'll want to work in close coordination because obviously we're touching VHA. It could impact patient care, all of that, so very mindful of that.
So how long have you been waiting for the decision to find out exactly what you're going to be dealing with for this other system?
So for us particularly, and I don't want to speak for supply chain because I'm not sure how long they've been working the effort, but for us directly, it's probably been, almost close to 2 years. And as I indicated, we continued to work with VHA in the absence of understanding what that would look like. So I don't think that we've had significant wasted time. We've continued to move that effort forward.
Okay. Mr. McCune, is this a technical problem or a lack of management?
Sir, I appreciate the question. I think I would defer to the Supply Chain Program Office. I'm not sure we've got the right people here to answer that question today. Be happy to take that for the record.
Please do. Please do. You can't address a problem if you don't know what it is and who's responsible for bringing the answer forward. So that's why please have them check in. Mr. Dahl, your office has written many reports about problems with VA's inventory management and the current inventory system called GIP. How much improvement will adding IFAMs make, and what else does VA need to truly improve the inventory management?
I think an updated system is obviously overdue. That GIP is an old system as well. Again, though, people are involved, and part of the issues we see when we go out is that, people are not accurately tracking what they take or what they put into inventory. We go to facilities where they're not using, barcodes. They're ordering based on walking rather than, relying on automated software that should trigger ordering.
So some of this stuff is just personal responsibility, people not taking the initiative to do what they're supposed to do, follow process.
I would say that is certainly part of it. Part of it could be the frustration with the system.
Okay. Well, that's the
why.
purpose, right. Okay, thank you very much. Representative Sherfless McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dahl, what are the risks at VA for not standardizing their financial management practices and implementing this system?
Well, I talked a little bit about, continuing with material weaknesses would be likely. They'd still be doing the manual workarounds for certain things. I would say bigger picture, you have to look at it that VA recognized the need to replace FMS more than 2 decades ago. They weren't successful with core FLS or flight. They're now working with IFAMs. I would say that, if this system is not successful, how much longer will it take to get a modern system? How much effort? How much financial resource? So I'm very hopeful that IFAMS is going to be successful because obviously we're dealing with a system that's 40 years old and it's not meeting the needs. So it really is, I think, vital that VA does all they can to get this system online.
Now, I have a broader question, which is in the same vein. What would it take for VA to change their culture around IT modernization? We've seen the issue from your report with compliance, with cybersecurity best practices, but I'm assuming there's an even larger issue that have contributed to the lack of success for all IT modernization programs.
I think that VA is in a challenging situation right now, needing to replace these a number of major systems all at once. I think it's an opportunity right now for improved communication and coordination with the various aspects of the department that need to be involved in these. I think that there's opportunities or a need for people to engage the stakeholders, adequately define requirements, come up with reliable and reasonable project schedules, cost estimates. I think it's important that they do systems testing, that user feedback stays at the forefront, that they consider the concerns of the users, that they take the lessons learned from whatever system they're currently working or any other system that they've implemented in the recent past. Take those lessons learned and go forward with that.
Mr. Kuhn, could you please answer the same question? What would it take to change the culture?
Thank you for the question. I think what we're finding is that all these programs are not the same, right? Some of them, FMBT in particular, has the advantage of an early start, and we're definitely looking at best practices from FMBT and applying those to the other products. So I'm excited about what we're seeing on FMBT, the success to date, and certainly that early coordination, particularly that business process re-engineering that happens early to make sure we've got consistency and standardization on the business processes, the incremental releases, the wave strategy, which allows you to do multiple things in parallel. Those are all best practices that we're seeing on FMBT, and we're looking at applying those elsewhere as well.
And how could Congress assist and support you in changing that culture?
I think Congress is supporting us in that, and we certainly welcome your ongoing support.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to belabor this, but my questions, I will turn to the 2022, fiscal year 2022 audit findings. There are 10 findings here of the previous year's findings. Of the 10, 3 have modified repeat at material weakness. These are financial audits. 2 are significant deficiencies. 5 are non-compliance. Those are the internal audits, I do believe. Mr. Dahl, would you like to comment on these 10?
VA has a number of challenges. We've talked quite a bit today about the financial management and reporting systems. That is a material weakness. It is not likely to go away without upgrading and getting a modern system online. So we are likely years away from that. Other material weaknesses revolve around information technology security and over at VBA, the need to work on the estimates for future liabilities. Those are the ones that the auditors are most concerned with, the material weaknesses. But you're right, we find the same or almost the same thing year after year.
And I think that's my point. How can you assure us that this time it's going to be different? The Chicago Cubs did that for 50 years.
Yeah, my Red Sox did it for longer, unfortunately. I wish I had a crystal ball and could say that this is going to solve all of VA's problems, but it's not. This is just one piece It's a significant piece, but it's one piece of VA's solution towards having an easier time of getting a clean audit opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative. I have just one more question, Mr. Riffle. According to your schedule, the IFAM system will not be implemented in the majority of the Veterans Health Administration for another 4 years, and it will not be implemented in the Veterans Benefits Administration Disability Compensation Service, which spends more than half of the department's entire budget until 2029. When do you consider the project to have reached critical mass and demonstrated success?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one of the things I'd like to point out about Veterans Benefits Administration is that although we still have loan guarantee, C&P, and education and insurance left to do, we do have approximately 70% of their expected users in the system right now. So most of the work with these mission-critical programs is surrounding interface work. They have about 100 users for each one of those programs that will come on to support those programs. But just want to point out for VBA, we do have a large percentage of those users in the system. For VHA, as I mentioned earlier, we are in the process now of laying out what their schedule will actually look like given the direction with supply chain. And I do believe that, once we get a couple of pilots, get lessons learned, make any modifications we need to, we'll look for opportunities in the future to accelerate that. I would say, and I don't want to speak for Charles, but I think for VBA, as we re-baseline the VBA schedule, we will certainly look to work with VBA to try to accelerate the remainder of that work.
Okay. Any more questions? No. Representative Sell. Okay. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their testimony today, and the panel is excused from the witness table. With that, I'll yield to Ranking Member Surplus McCormick for your closing statement.
Thank you, Chairman Rosendale. I appreciate the testimony and answers from our witnesses this afternoon. I feel there is consensus on what we need to do to move forward and be successful. I truly do not want to see this program suffer the same fate as other modernization programs. I feel that the management in charge is very capable of succeeding, but I want to ensure she is not burdened by the lack of success of other failed programs. Employees, veterans, and members of Congress have had enough with the current lack of success, and I look forward to working together to ensure we have more positive outcomes in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Surplus McCormick. I want to thank the witnesses for joining us this afternoon. Congress has always prioritized veterans' health care and benefits, and the size of the VA budget, $325 billion, reflects that. But it is inexcusable and downright irresponsible for the department to be managing that much money without a accounting system that's barely functioning. The FMBT program has to succeed, and despite some significant bumps in the road, I do believe that it can. We need to see the IFAM system rolled out to the key offices that handle the majority of the VA budget. This committee will be watching if the improvements that have been promised are actually delivered, and we will be monitoring whether this project is able to hit its timelines and recover its delays. I'm committed to keeping it moving forward, not stumbling and repeatedly like the EHRM system. No more projects can be permitted to fail again and again, yet continue to receive funding from the taxpayers. That is unacceptable. With that, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. With no objection, so ordered, this hearing is adjourned.